Continuing on from the last episode, we now got our miniatures all nicely undercoated, and it's time to start getting some paint on the brush and then onto the miniatures. There are two basic techniques for this. We can go for the inside out technique, which is where we'd start with the face and the hands and things and then work outwards from that, and finishing up with something like his armor or fatigues. Or we can go biggest to smallest, where we start with fatigues and we work progressively down through all the areas of the miniature and finish up on the smallest detail, such as the winged skull on his rifle. I'm actually going to go for the outside in method, which means we will start with some Zandri dust all over his uniform fatigues. Don't forget to give your paint a good shake before using them. I'll be using an Army Painter monster brush for this. Get some paint on your palette. Make sure you've got plenty on there. Thin it down slightly with water to get a nice finish. That's running nice and smoothly. And just start applying paint to all of these fatigue areas. Don't forget, it's always better to put on several thin coats than one thick one, so as not to obscure any detail. And because we're painting sort of line troops, we will be using a production line kind of method to get this painted. So we will paint all the Zandri dust on this guy and then progressively through the rest of the miniatures until they're all done. This way we can fairly quickly get paint on everything and a very similar finish, because we're doing them all at once. So I'll get back to you once all this Zandri dust is complete. Now that we've completed the Zandri dust on a nice even coat over all the fatigues on the entire squad, it's time to move on to the next stage, which will be the armour. So the helmet, the chest piece and the greaves and the two shoulder pads. And for this we'll be starting with a base coat of Citadel colour Castellian green. As usual, we will be putting a blob on the palette, not forgetting to give the paint a good old shake beforehand. Put a blob on the palette, make sure there's plenty on there. There we go, 2 blobs, and a touch of water just to thin it down a little and get a nice smooth paint. And we will begin applying to all of these armoured areas on the entire squad. Now that we've got all the armour done with a nice neat coat, you'll see that painting the armour has cleaned up a lot of the overpaint on the khaki fatigues, which is all part of the plan. The rest of this will be cleared up as we go along, but now it's time to start on our model skin tones with a nice, rich, warm base coat for this, and for that I'll be using Citadel Bugman's Glow. As usual, I'm going to put a little bit onto my palette. And thin it down a little with water. And now, because we're working with a much smaller, finer area, we're going to be using a much smaller, finer brush, and start with his hands and face, and when all this is done, I'll get right back to you. With the flesh complete and the model starting to look good, we're now ready to tie these three areas we painted together with the use of a shade. For this, I'm going to be using Agrac's Earthshade from Citadel Colour, which is a nice, rich, warm umber in all the areas that we've already painted, so the flesh tones, the armour and the fatigues. This will not only give them some depth where it's looking a little flat now, but it will also tie the miniature together because we're using the same colour all over. So give your ink a shake, plop a little on your palette and start applying it to those areas. Remembering, of course, that these inks, because they're very thin, do have a tendency to pool, but it's not an issue because we'll keep an eye on it. In any areas of pooling, like this, we can just clean our brush and lift it out. So I will shade all of these and get back to you guys when they're complete. It's the next day IRL for me, and as you can see, the shading and the wash has dried quite nicely and settled into all those lovely recesses. The next stage will be to go back with the Zandri Dust, the Castellan Green and Bugman's Glow and just paint the upper edges, such as here on his fatigue leggings and on the pockets of his leggings here, on the shoulder pad, top of the helmet, and on his face it will be the nose, chin, cheekbones, etc. Tips of his fingers, and basically we'll go over that. So I'll get some Zandri Dust onto my palette. We are now going to be using slightly smaller brushes, a little bit of water just to prime the pot. Give that a shake because it's had time to settle. Get your water mix on. This needs to be a slightly thinner coat than we used for base coating. Clean the brush up, give it a twist to get a point on. And then we will move into just the highlights. So places like this. So around the edge of the thigh pocket here. The flap. Across that ridge. These leggings. And so on. Avoiding the deep places until we've got a nice even coat of the Zandri Dust all over his fatigues, the green for the armour pieces, and again the skin tones. So I shall come back into you after I've completed that. There we have the first layer of the highlighting finished, and as you can see we are looking much nicer now along the creases and edges of his fatigues, on his face and hands, and on the armour. So yeah, everything's looking much nicer. The shadows and the deep parts are looking deep and shadowy, and the top parts are looking. Now that we've got all these final edge highlights done, as you can see the face has been picked out nicely and it's come up quite nice. You can see on the edges of the fatigues there where it's picked up a nice highlight, and again on the very edges of the armour pieces, the helmet there and the shoulder pad, some pieces on the back where you can see them. So the next stage is to go over all these parts where we haven't added any colour yet and cover up where we've gone over quite carefully with black to give a nice base coat, which will do for all the leatherwork pouches, weapon casings and his boots and things. Then we will go over with a metallic silvery colour for the blade of his bayonet and the other metallic parts like the magazine and his weapon there, some other bits and bats, and finally on we'll be touching up these detail pieces like the winged skull on his helmet there and on his weapon. And if I quickly find him, there we go, you'll see. Oh, let's move back into the camera. There, you've got the sergeant chevrons here, which we will also pick up in the same colour, which we'll probably use a nice grey, I think, for those. So we will start off with the black. I'm using a Baden black from Citadel. Put a blob on the palette. A bit of water. And we can start going over these black bits. Not forgetting that if it doesn't cover in the first go, 2 thin coats is always going to be preferable to 1 thick one. So I will carry on with these, making sure that we're very neat and we don't go over any of the parts that are now finished. But if you do, stop, take a breath, wait a second, go over them with the colours again so that everything is picked back up, and don't panic. The key to painting, once you've got your eye in and you've worked out how to get a steady hand, is patience. If you're patient, you can pretty much guarantee a finish that is at the very least going to look pretty on your wargaming tabletop. We're not all going to be painting competition winners, guys and girls, or whatever you identify as, because there is definitely no judgment here. Paint away, take your time, and most of all, enjoy the process. There we can see all the black on the weapon. His boots, belt and equipment have been nicely and tidily finished. So with that complete, we will move on to the metallic parts, where we will be putting little dots of Citadel lead belcher on things like these studs on the water bottle and pouches here, and the metallic parts of the gun, so the bayonet blade, the barrel, magazine, and just inside there his belt buckle. With that in mind, we will be taking a quite small brush, which will be my army painter detail brush. Put a little bit of Citadel lead belcher on the palette. Tiny drop of water. And then we can get straight in with these metallic parts. As per usual, if it doesn't cover straight away, don't worry about it. 2 thin coats are always going to be preferable to 1 thick one. And if, like here, it seems to be going on a little bit heavy, just wipe your brush and lift the excess off. So I'll get on with this and get back to you when I've done the metallic parts on the entire squad. Now we have all the metallic parts complete. The next thing to do is, of course, change our water so that there's no chance of the small metal flakes in metallics contaminating any further paints that we may use. Anyway, the next parts to do are here and here, where you can see the very small eagles, which are the final details to paint. And so I'll be going through that on this model using Citadel Celestial Grey, which I've already mixed up on my wet palette. Let's get this in the right place, and very gently touching that to these areas. With the Celestial Grey done on the winged skulls, we can now move on. Oh, I'll show you the one on the back as well, as I forgot before. There we go, there's one on the water bottles as well. Okay, now that we've done the Celestial Grey, we can go over the black, metallic and Celestial Grey parts with, there we go, get it in focus, Null Oil Shade from Citadel, which will fill in the deeper areas and darken the metallic slightly. So I'll get a little bit on my brush. We can use this straight from the pot. We don't want too much on the brush for this coat, because we want to keep good control of it. There's a little bit too much on there, so I'll wipe it on my towel. So if we go into this area here, focused again, there we go. So if we go into this area here, you can see that it immediately runs into the deeper areas of the wing skull, giving it instant depth and shade. Now then, if we do the same on these metallic parts here, and going on to the black as well, so that we get an edge, you can see that that will pick up and shade all the little pieces. So I will get on with that on all the guardsmen, and we can come back to you when everything has a nice little shade on it. Not forgetting that these washes will take an hour, maybe a little more, to dry thoroughly, so it might be time for me to go and have some dinner. So I'll get on with this and we'll speak again very soon. And there we have it, all the black, the silver and the winged skulls have now been shaded with the non-oil. And I think you'll agree that that brings the colour out just perfect, and they look pretty darn good. Now, you can put a final highlight onto these areas if you choose, but I think I'm actually very happy with this finish. So I'm going to base them up to match the rest of my army, which is what I suggest you do too, because it'd look a bit weird if they didn't match. For this, I'm probably going to use, what is it? Yes, Still and Mud Technical Paint from Citadel, which will give them a nice earthy feel. So we'll pop some Still and Mud on the bases, being careful not to get it onto his boots. Then a very quick wash after it's dried, and it does take around an hour to dry. a quick wash of Agarax Earthshade over the top, and then a dry brush all over the top of that with Ushbati Bone, I think, which doesn't matter if you do get a little bit onto his boots and leggings, because it will just help to tie the miniature in. So I'll come back to you when I've done all that, and we'll have a little bit of an outro. And there we have the entire squad finished. All the paint done. The bases are now complete. I've added some water slide transfers to the shoulders to give them a squad number and a squad marking. I think everything looks quite nice. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below. If you liked this video, please leave a like. Equally, if you didn't like it, leave a dislike. Share, subscribe and hit the bell icon to see more content just like this. I'm happy that you stayed to the end. I really enjoyed producing this. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed producing it. I love your faces, you beautiful people. Thank you and goodbye.